If it goes right, it's a slice. If it goes left, it's a hook. If it goes straight, it's a miracle. This is Out of Bounds. If it's happening in the world of golf, we're talking about it. Coverage, debate, discussion, pro golf and local golf. Let's do it. This is Out of Bounds. And here are your hosts, Nate Sharman and Josh Durso.
Hello and welcome to another Out of Bounds podcast here on FingerLakes1.com. I am Nate Sharman, joined by, as always, Josh Durso. We got some no-cut news out of the PGA Tour. Let's get right into it.
Oh, yeah, we do. The Tour Board has approved a new scheduling approach for the 2024 season. We've got reduced fields in some select designated events, so they will be turned into no-cut events. It's not going to apply to all of the elevated events, but a handful of them.
Right.
Feels World Golfy, feels like Live, feels like a lot of things. I know you have some feelings about it.
Right.
You aren't a fan?
No, not at all. I don't like no-cut events. It's just we've talked so much this past calendar year about how bad Live events are with no-cut. With 60 players, with 50 to 70, this is going to be a little bit more than the 54 players in Live. It's going to be more like 70 to 78. They have outlined how you get into these so far. Not too intricate at this point. The top 50 in the rankings, top 10 from last year that aren't in the top 50 from this year will get in, and then a few more exemptions other ways that gets you to about 70 to 78 players estimated. They're looking at about 8 elevated events next year out of I think it's like in the low teens. Or maybe even smaller than that total for elevated events. But yeah, not a big fan. This year we've seen so many fun events that have been not the no-cut events, besides that first one that we had with no-cut with the Century, which is usually a no-cut event. But that's okay. Having a few of them is fine, but I don't really want to watch 70 players play a no-cut event. It feels kind of repetition and boring 8 times a season or more than 8 times a season now. That could happen.
I mean, I think... Well, to that point, I think people could get frustrated or tired of seeing Jon Rahm every single week doing what he's been doing, with this past weekend being an exception. I like it. I don't think it's necessary, which is kind of the weird part for me. Like, I feel like this was something that the tour had already created. These high-profile events,
and
that
I thought
were
that was
going
necessary.
to
What they're doing this year, I thought that was necessary.
So, like, why take this extra step? It feels more like a response to potential pressure that sponsors were maybe putting on the tour to have more value, given that they are having to pony up more to be like lead sponsor of these high-profile events. I don't know. Like, to me, it just doesn't. I don't see how it changes much, because at the end of the day. We'll use the last 3 weeks as an example, or the last 3 elevated events as an example. Sunday afternoon, you're watching the best handful of players, household names, come down the stretch and battle to get a win, and then ultimately get that win on 16 or 17 or 18 because they made a putt or they played really well. You're not going to remember that there wasn't a cut. You're not going to care that there wasn't a cut. Yeah,
but maybe you have a guy like Kurt Kitayama not get in. I'm not sure what his standing would be, if he would be in or not. It'd be close for him.
I think the tour is going to have to build a fix-in to that. And if it hasn't already been thought of, it will be thought of. Yeah. I don't see a scenario where the tour, waters this. I know you've got a couple James Hahn types on social media who've made a very big deal about how this is how the haves get bigger and win more money, and the have-nots are just going to struggle. And my answer to that is the non-elevated events are essentially gimmies to the non-elevated players.
That's a good point.
Because the elevated player, the players that are in the top 50 or top 70 or whatever it winds up being, by and large, aren't participating in these events.
Right.
We haven't seen more than maybe like 2 or 3 players any given week out of the top 20 or top whatever 30, 40, 50 play in these non-elevated events. So they are getting an opportunity.
That's fantastic.
That's frankly, probably better because they don't have to compete against Jon Rahm.
Right. That's
Like-
what one of the guys said. One of the lower have-nots, if you will, said,
Yeah.
it's going to be nice to not have to play against Jon Rahm.
Right.
So that's a good point. That's one thing I don't think I thought about initially with the news.
I also think the tour probably has an opportunity at that point to start to introduce more secondary events. We see it throughout the season
Yeah,
every now
opposite
and then
field
where
events,
there's
right.
opposite field events.
Yep.
Probably see some more of those pop up.
There will have to be, opposite of these 8 elevated events. There'll need to
Yeah.
be somewhere for these guys to play.
Yeah, and again, great opportunity to make some money if you're
And I'll
a
watch those.
have-not.
And I'll watch those.
Right, and your dedicated golf fans who I think are frustrated with the idea that the guys that aren't household names, the people like you and I who like the stories,
I love the
stories
storylines.
behind the players that aren't really household names. You're still going to have an opportunity for those stories to be told. But when it comes to actually selling a product to millions of people, consumers who are going to sit in front of a TV, you need Rory McIlroy. You need your big names. You need
Right.
the Tiger. You need all of those players that are currently household names to be there Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah, that's
you can't
a good
have them there Thursday and Friday and then just not be there, Saturday and Sunday.
I guess my only argument to that is they have been there. The cream has risen to the crop. We've seen star-studded leaderboards so far in these elevated events.
My DFS lineup the last 3 weeks would argue otherwise because I have gotten blanked with a couple guys missing cuts. Justin Rose, I'm looking at you, and maybe a couple other players.
Well, you're not going to miss cuts next
you know,
year in these events.
I profile.
But the WGC events that we've seen no-cut events in the last few years, they haven't been extremely popular. I mean, they've been somewhat popular.
No, I think
I'm interested to see.
I feel like it becomes this throwaway idea. It's basically this throwaway rule that doesn't really have a huge impact on anything. Because again, if we're seeing good finishes week in and week out,
Right.
Sunday afternoon, when golf fans across the board really care, really give a damn, that's really all that matters.
Right.
Right? Like the rest of it doesn't really matter that much.
So let's get into the Arnold Palmer. That was a Sunday
Amazing.
that we had. It was a lot
Great
of
weekend.
fun. A star-studded leaderboard. Kurt Kitayama comes out on top, gets his first career PGA Tour win, and didn't get it easily as he held the 36-hole lead after Saturday. Made a triple bogey on 9. Did you see the picture of where his ball ended up?
I did, yeah.
So he hit his
Incredible.
drive right on 9, and it was no more than 8 inches out of bounds.
Yep.
And the best part of it too, Josh, he just left it there.
Yeah.
Just left it there, and he
Yeah,
ended up
whatever.
making a triple bogey with that penalty shot, and then he made 8 straight pars after that, or seven straight pars after that, which were a lot of good pars too, especially at the Arnold Palmer course on Sunday, which faced windy conditions, crispy greens, hard to hold those greens for sure. So credit to Kurt Kitayama. Not a lot of guys are making birdies. Kurt Kitayama steps up, knocks in a good decent putt on 17, and then makes a nice par on 18. Almost made birdie on 18 to win his first PGA Tour event. $3.6 million in the
Huge.
pocket for Kurt Kitayama.
Awesome weekend. Also, loved seeing how difficult Bay Hill played.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
wasn't expecting that at all. Number 9 averaged 0.4 of a stroke over par. That's the second hardest hole played so far this year on tour.
yeah. The winner made a
That's
triple.
just completely unexpected. And that was coming into it, and we're going to talk more about it later, but that was coming in one of my concerns with elevated events in general, that if the tour wasn't going to work hard to make these venues more challenging, more major-like,
Right.
that perhaps they could get boring because
Yeah.
there is some, if Jon Rahm is going to go shoot 20 under par every weekend, that can be frustrating to some golf fans.
Yeah, well, credit to Kurt Kitayama. I mean, we've talked so much about elevated events, right? And Rory talked about it too, how you have to, for lack of a better term, play better to get into these elevated events. Kurt Kitayama is a guy who's been on every single tour, it seems, as of late. He's been on the Korn Ferry Tour. He's won there. He's been on a couple different tours that have eventually qualified last year in the Korn Ferry Tour Finals for the PGA Tour, got his card back, won this event. So kudos to Kitayama. He did what he needed to do to get in this event, and then he went and won the damn thing against a lot of really good players on Sunday.
Yeah, and I think it debunks the idea that only the best, the real best in the
Certainly
world
does.
are going to be able to win these tournaments. Like, clearly anybody can win any week. It goes back to the point that the difference between the guys that get into these events and the guys that are just on the outside isn't much. So I think when we really start to see some churn, when this system really gets going, I think it would be really cool because you could have guys that perhaps didn't qualify for the last elevated event and then win an elevated event and a few weeks later. Right. And that is just kind of the dynamic that I think once this thing gets going, the tour is really going to be able to lean into, and it will make it more. It will add an extra layer of interest in all of this stuff.
That $3.6 million is just life-changing money for Kurt Kitayama. Coming in, he'd made about $2.5 million-ish playing pro golf. He now more than doubles his career earnings.
That's crazy.
Gets some sponsor exemptions into a few events remaining in the year. Gets status as a winner on the PGA Tour. It's just unbelievable for Kurt. Definitely was nice to finally see a non-big fish win an elevated event.
Yeah,
I didn't have a problem with like the John Rahms, the Schefflers playing well in those events and securing wins. I didn't have a problem with that at all because none of them were runaways. Yeah. But it was kind of nice to see a guy that went up against the trees, right? You had Rory, JT didn't play well on Sunday, but you had Scheffler, you had all these guys playing really well on Sunday, and Kitayama stepped up to the plate, hit it out of the park.
Jordan Spieth had to share the lead.
Jordan Spieth, yeah,
had to share the lead for.
Did you see the putt he made? Did you see the putt he made where he hit it and he did the Jordan Spieth thing where he was pissed and then it went in?
Yep. And the several that he missed and made.
Yeah, his putter got really cold on the back nine. It was really
really cold.
I think he started birdie or three of his first four.
Yeah, and then he had that stretch where I believe 2 of the 3 of the putts that he missed that would have saved par were inside of 5 feet.
Yeah,
and up until that point he hadn't missed anything inside 5 feet.
Right.
So it was just a tough. That is Jordan Spieth golf.
Yeah.
To a T.
I love watching Jordan
Super
Spieth.
hot, super cold. He can hit some incredible shots, but if something's going to let him down, it seems to be his driver or his putter, and they always seem to let him down at the worst possible time.
It's fun to watch Jordan Spieth, though, because he's always chatting with Greller. Greller's always he's always chatting with Greller or himself, and he seems like he's beating himself up, but that's just kind of the way he plays and the way he's always been.
And it's always so amplified, right? Him playing poorly, a lot of people would view how he played this past weekend now as playing poorly because he basically had a bad stretch of 4 holes on Sunday. But he is so close. He is so close. If he gets that putter figured out, it really he is one of those guys that could run off a 2 or 3 win stretch over the course of a month or a month and a half, and absolutely no one would be surprised.
I'd much rather watch him yell at himself or Greller or anything than go into a sponsor's interview on the back nine at the Arnold Palmer, where we can't see golf shots for upwards of 5 to 10 minutes because we're doing an interview in the cabin.
Yeah, that was tough. That was really tough.
Not a banner week for NBC. They took a lot of heat on Twitter for their coverage.
They deserved it. I mean, you've got to prioritize play. And I think the missing piece right now for the changes that the tour has made is not exerting any more control over the product that's getting shown on CBS or NBC. CBS has done a good job, I think.
And so has the Golf Channel.
Golf Channel's done a good job. Now, the interesting thing to me is, the Golf Channel is owned by NBC.
Right.
This is how can the product be that much different?
Just the sponsors have been kicking in so much more money for those big elevated events, right? That's the only thing I can come to.
And
so they can control the product.
I think at the end of the day, they're going to have to do something to fix. I do think the model that we saw earlier this year with CBS having a title sponsor with that last hour.
Yeah, that was Golf
Channel.
And
then just running it all the way. I think that's the model.
Right.
It's probably just going to take a while for all the networks to get their ducks in a row. And
let's hope NBC can figure it out, because it's just tough when you saw Harris English played well all day Sunday, but you wouldn't have known it. I mean,
I had no idea. Yeah.
Until the last couple holes when they finally showed him. But we got another fun event, another elevated event, right? This week, the Players Championship at TPC Sawgrass, often tabulated as the 5th major. We could talk about that, whether we agree with that or not. I mean, we've had some 5th major talk here on Out of Bounds the last few weeks, but just a lot of fun. One of my favorite events of the year. I would call it a 5th major. I'm okay with that. It's just got a great final finishing holes. Par 5, 16th, that's gettable. 17th, we obviously know about the island green. A short par 3, but it's an island green, so it's very intimidating. And then 18 is one of the hardest finishing holes in my opinion. Water up all down the left side, par 4. So especially tough when you're holding that lead, but we finally made it to Sawgrass.
We can call the Players the original elevated event,
Yes.
right? The original elevated event. Before elevated events, this was the one with the gigantic purse compared to, other events.
I think it still has a little bit higher purse than some of the other events.
And, I think that the lore around this event, the tour kind of has a few events now, I think, that are kind of in between these elevated events and majors, this being one of them, WM Open being another one, that they're probably going to find a way to capitalize on in the future. They just have to figure out how they're going to do that, because obviously these events mean a hell of a lot more to the players,
Right.
and also to golf fans in general, because they're so identifiable. Like, obviously the Island Green 17 is so identifiable, but even just in general, the back nine of Sawgrass is something that golf fans and even more casual golf fans there's visual cues that they remember, even if they aren't watching it every single year, every round.
And it's similar to the Phoenix Open too. It's got a little bit of stadium golf course vibes to it. It's not fully a stadium course, but definitely has some vibes to it. Let's get into the biggest storyline though. Last year's winner, Cameron Smith, obviously can't play this year because he's on the Live Tour. They're doing an interview with him, and they're talking to him about what he's going to do this week during the Players' Championship.
Hilarious.
He unveils that he lives around there and that he might attend the Players' Championship as a fan.
Maybe he'll just show up. I think that would be the wildest thing ever.
Do they let him in? Like, can they stop him from coming in?
No, I think you have to let him in. I also don't think he does anything if he gets in. He's not.
Oh, yeah, he's just going to watch the golf.
He's not a troublemaker. Like, he's literally just going to wander around like a fan.
Right.
And, I think the media would care more than anybody else that he's there. He'd probably be treating it like a fan.
Yeah.
And he'd probably, obviously, he'd have, some security and whatnot so that he wasn't, getting into any spots where he wouldn't want to with fans around, because this is obviously one of the more heavily attended events through the year. But, no, I wouldn't see any issue with him showing up.
He'd have his Live Golf clothes on, his T-shirt.
He was asked if he would heckle anybody, and
he said no.
He said no. I mean, of course he wouldn't.
Right.
He's not a heckler. What do you think? I mean, what do you think? Is
It's
it like
hilarious.
it's kind of a non-story? Like, I just think it's funny that he said what he said.
It's awesome. I always love when golfers say something that's not like patent.
Right.
Like
It's
they're
not
they're
just
often
the scripted
they're
kind of
often
feeling
yes
thing.
golfers and another sport that I like a lot, hockey players, are often scripted in their interviews. They really say what they're designed to say, whether it be their PR staff or just knowing how to speak to the media. They're very good at that. So it's always fun to watch someone kind of say something different. I would love to see Cam Smith there. You know me, I'm a Cam Smith fan. I'd love to see him playing golf too this week at Sawgrass. Okay, let's get into our picks for the week. We'll look at our past champions. Obviously, Cameron Smith last year. 2021 was JT. We skipped 2020 due to the pandemic. 2019, Rory. 2018 was Si Woo Kim.
It's interesting. This is a very interesting tournament for a lot of reasons.
Yep.
You know what? I think if we're talking about picks, Patrick Cantlay, to me,
Hard to pick against him.
He's an easy pick because we've literally watched him just hang around for the last 3-4 weeks.
Yep.
It's just
He was there last
been
week.
around.
Yep.
And his odds are not as low as you'd expect. He's at plus 1,600. Number 2 on tour for birdies per round at 5.18. And then looking at the last dozen or so years, this tournament, the winner has finished at 12 under or better going back to 2009, 12 out of the last 13 starts. So this is not a low-scoring Bay Hill style event. This will be one where the winner does finish between probably 12 and 16 under par. So that's gonna set up well for guys like Patrick Cantlay, who just piled on birdies all year consistently.
Right.
What do you think?
So I'm going with the same pick I had last week. He didn't win. He came in right around the top 20, maybe just outside the top 20 with Justin Thomas. He's won here before, as I mentioned, back a couple years ago where he was able to win this tournament. He's been seeming to play a little bit better here as of late at plus 1,800. I just like the value on JT. A great odds boost going on DraftKings right now, plus 250 to any of the odds on the outrights. So I got JT at about 20-1. So I think that's a pretty good thing. Another good odds boost, I think it's on FanDuel. They're boosting hole-in-one on 17.
Oh, I'd love to see it.
So that's just fun. We saw one last year.
man.
with Shane Lowry. He made a
Yeah.
1. So it's it's a short par 3, about 100. I think it's like 137 yards.
Tougher, smaller field.
Yeah. So I mean, it's just a fun bet. Just something to just throw. I just threw $10 on it and see what happens. And
All right, long
watch.
shot bets. What are we thinking for a long shot pick?
Guy that I just mentioned, Shane Lowry,
Eh?
35-1. He's played well as of late. We've seen him on the leaderboards here and there. Made that 1 last year at 17, so he clearly likes his golf course. So I'm going with Shane Lowry.
I'm going with Justin Rose because I look at what he does. He's kind of been hot and cold the last month and a half. Odds at plus 66, which is, really high for a guy who's, basically top 10 golfer in the world.
1 on tour this year, right?
Yeah, well, he's number 1 on tour for putting 20 to 25 feet, 34-ish% make rate, number 2 in sand saves and approaches from the rough inside 150. Like, those are two figures when you're talking about a week where scoring is going to be, the most important thing, not just surviving like we saw last weekend, but actually scoring, making birdies.
Right.
I think he's a guy that could be in position, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's, hanging around in the top 5 on Sunday.
I know who producer Paul's picking, Ricky Fowler.
Of course.
Former TPC Sawgrass champion back in 2015.
Yeah.
That was the prime Ricky right there.
That feels like it was so long ago.
Yeah, I went and watched the video. It's unbelievable shot that he hit on 17 in the playoff.
Yeah.
He hit it, the famous pin position, obviously, on the right side of that
Tucked in
green.
on the right side, yeah.
He hit it between the water and the pin to about
Yeah.
6 feet.
Yeah, it's an incredible golf shot under immense pressure.
Right. So Paul picking Ricky if I had to bet. And also Paul won again for our DraftKings last week. We all finished pretty far out of the money, I would say.
Oh, yeah.
I was in the back 10%, almost in dead last, with a couple guys missing the cut. So another win for Paul. What do you have to say, Paul? Do you have any words?
Don't gloat, Paul. Don't gloat.
To be fair, I did finish top half in the pool, but yeah, it was a rough week.
If you ain't first, you're last.
What are you gonna do?
None of us have made money yet on any of
No,
this.
no.
So there's that.
I've placed a couple times
Really?
early in the year, yeah. It's been a few weeks for me, but
About the
all right,
same. I've made a couple bucks.
let's try it again this week for TPC Sawgrass. My lineup headlined by my outright pick, Justin Thomas. I also got your outright pick in Patrick Cantlay. Rounding out with Shane Lowry, Keith Mitchell, Davis Riley, and the head case himself, Jordan Spieth.
So I've got Scotty Scheffler as my number 1 pick. I've got Patrick Cantlay as my number 2 pick. Then we round out with Keegan Bradley, Sam Burns, who I think is due. Guys due. Like I feel like I've been banging this drum now for a whole 6-month span. Ricky Fowler and Kurt Kitayama. I think momentum is a good thing. I think he could have a good weekend. I don't know that he's going to win, but I could see him having a nice, healthy top 10, top 15 finish, which would be great for the DFS lineup. It's all about straight. This is all about straight. I'm not trying to pick 6 winners here. I'm just trying to pick 6 guys who are gonna actually make the cut, which has been a struggle for me the last
that's the battle.
last several weeks. God.
Paul, who you got over there?
Yeah, so Ricky's in my lineup. I don't know why my mind went to Ricky, but Rory's my number 1. I've kind of rode Rahm here for a few weeks, but I think we'll switch it up. Go Rory this week.
Smart.
My second pick, even though budget-wise it appears as though it would be Colin Morikawa, I actually went with Victor Hovland before I took Colin. So.
He struggled on Sunday.
Yeah, he really
was. I'm not a huge fan of my 6. After obviously the top 3, I got Ricky. I went with Detry. I believe he's Belgian, but I think he's a decent value again. I mean, he's averaging just under 70 fantasy points per weekend, and at 7,100, I just kind of have to roll with it. And Aaron Badley as well. So I'm not.
They're all gambles at that point.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan, really, of honestly my bottom half, and that does include Ricky as much as I'd love for him to kind of ride.
Paul's always got 2 golf boys on his team.
But yeah,
Ricky could. Ricky is he's a past winner. past winter, he could show up. You never know.
But then
That's for
again,
sure.
I've won 3 of our 5 of the collective pool here.
Oof.
So I mean, who knows?
He had to rub that in.
Yeah.
He had to
Well,
rub that in.
I think
All right.
anyone could have beat me last week, as I almost came in last.
Let's get into the biggest talking point after Sunday. Rory's not understanding how golf fans could possibly
Yeah.
appreciate or like watching or find entertainment value in guys making bogeys coming down the stretch.
Yeah, he was quoted after in the press conference saying he doesn't understand how the lead changing via bogeys is better than the lead changing via birdies. And the golf world responded with, "You have it totally backwards, Rory." In my mind, anyway, I think it's fun to see the lead change with bogeys here every once in a while. I don't want to see that every week. I do like to see the birdie fest here and there, and you will continue to see that. But that yesterday, I think Rory was just kind of hot off the moment. He didn't win the event, so I think that's kind of why that came out like that. I bet you if you asked Rory, he would rather say it in a different way.
Somebody's going to ask him about it this weekend.
Right.
They have to. Somebody, undoubtedly someone will. Because
And he'll be ready
was-
for it this time.
It was like roundly every corner of golf world, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, felt the same way. Like,
Yeah.
This is what? It's okay. Bogeys are okay.
Right.
It's
And-
relatable.
Yeah, it's
more
very
relatable
Right.
for somebody who's sitting on their couch watching golf on Sunday. They're not getting paid millions of dollars to play golf. Like, it's relatable. It makes you look human. And also, by the way, you want to talk about the least relatable thing in the world? Watching guys like John Rahm or anybody shoot 28 under at the Sony Open or whatever the case may be at some of these tournaments. I think of the ones in Hawaii in the beginning of the year that just become outrageous,
Right.
25 or more under par over the course of a weekend. That is completely unrelatable. There isn't anything that's, fun about watching these guys just destroy golf courses.
And I think what you've said too, Josh, is there's a sweet spot that you can find.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I think, like, having thought about this a little bit since we texted about it on Sunday, I think like the sweet spot for me between scoring and difficulty is somewhere between like 7 under and 11 under for a 4-round golf tournament.
Right. And it's interesting too. I mean, Kitayama finished at 9 under. Rahm was 7 under after the first day.
Yeah.
I mean, Rahm didn't have the best next 3 day
he
stretch.
shot
of course.
back-to-back 76s, so
Yeah.
that'll hurt you.
They
But-
they asked him what changed, and he said it's really effing hard out there. That's what he said in the interview.
I mean, and that just proves that, like, it's, what we talked about last week, we said this isn't that long of a golf course. But they
Right.
can make these golf courses challenging and difficult without, one, them being 76 or 77 or 7,800 yards, and two, without killing them.
Right.
Like, like what some of the things we've seen in the past with the U.S. Open.
Right.
So, this is doable. I think this is probably going to be something along the lines of the setup that we see with probably at least half of the elevated events moving forward.
The only thing I get worried about with making it more difficult is then you get guys to play defensive. They're hitting it to spots on the greens where they're 50 feet, 50, 60 feet away, and they're just making a pile of pars. And I think that can be challenging for the average golf viewer. At one end, I know we're talking about the relatable sense, but you do want to see birdies. You want to see guys hitting it in tight. You want to see guys taking chances. So you get these challenging golf course guys that are going to play defensive. They're going to hit it to spots, play target golf, and, try to make 4s instead of 5s or 3s. They're really going to be focused on, trying not to really hurt themselves.
I don't think you'd see guys doing that unless the weather was really a factor.
You saw that a little bit on Sunday.
Yeah, to some degree. But, I mean, at the same time, it was still an awesome product.
Oh my God, it was the
overall.
best of the best. I mean, maybe recency bias is a little bit for me, but I was glued on Sunday.
Like, it's a golf course. And also, like, I think with a lot of these events, Bay Hill, they're there every year.
Right.
These guys know this golf course. Like, they're not going to play defensively the way they, the way we see guys play in the U.S. Open, when it's at a course that is truly, like, just on the brink of life and death.
Yeah, that golf course means so much to them too with Arnold Palmer. You
Yeah.
could just tell how
Yeah.
much it means to them.
So, I like it. I like it. What do you think the sweet spot is for scoring?
I agree with you. I like that 7 to 11.
7 to 11 range, yeah.
But yeah, I still go back to just having trouble every week. If we do that every single week, I think sprinkling in some birdie fests at the right time is a lot of fun to watch.
I think there's enough of it Because like this weekend, you could use, I guess, this past weekend as a really good example. Like Thursday, John Rahm goes out, and everybody, like there were a bunch of like 4 and 5, 4, 5, 6 unders. So they went out, they scored, and then conditions got a little tighter, things got a little tougher, and yeah, there we were, like at a Sunday afternoon, and -8, -9. For a while we thought there might be a playoff at -7 or -8.
-8 was my prediction on
So
Sunday, yeah.
like it was definitely. I think that's the right spot to be. I don't think anybody would complain or notice if all of these elevated events finished in that 7 to 11 range. They'd think, oh, this is
and
normal.
it does make the win sweeter too for Kitayama. I mean, he hit a really good golf shot on 17, that par 3 with water on the right side. He hit it in there to about, I don't know if it's about 25 feet, and then rolled in the putt. It never veered from the center of the cup. Perfect pace, just right in the heart.
I think
that makes it even better too to see a guy that goes out and gets it.
Yeah.
I always love to see that.
I mean, I think
Wasn't giving it.
I think back to I'm not sure if it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, when coming down the stretch, it was kind of like Max Homa and John Rahm kind of like had a shootout.
Yeah.
Coming down the stretch. And I think back to that. It's like, yes, that's exciting, but I tell you what, it will get very tiring to the average golf fan if they just see John Rahm and Max Homa or Rory McIlroy or whoever, the top 5 to 7 golfers in the world just birdieing the hell out of the golf course coming down the back 9 on Sunday.
Right.
Like they expect a little bit of challenge then.
Yep.
So, I think the tour will be creative in how they set these things up, these events up, so that they get a good mixed bag of both. But I think they should lean more into the challenging side of things because Bay Hill was awesome.
Agreed. All right, that's enough for today, Josh. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Out of Bounds podcast here on FingerLakes1.com. Be sure to follow us over on TikTok and Twitter at Out of Bounds Golf Pod. Always posting fun clips and analysis from the events. And remember, whether it's down the middle or out of bounds, keep on swinging.
You've been listening to Out of Bounds. If it's coverage, debate, or discussion of pro and local golf, we'll be talking about it. Be sure to visit the website at FingerLakes1.com. Find us on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter at Out of Bounds FL1. See you next time on Out of Bounds.